Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to DRM Open Sessions. I'm psychologist Dr. Paris Monroe, and I have with me today my two guests, Mr. Charles Howell here on my right side, long-term military veteran. I also have on my left side Mr. Jack Rogers, also a long-time military veteran. They're joining me today, as they have in the past, to continue our discussions on military life, PTSD, the effects of PTSD, how we can get over PTSD, what can we do, can it be gotten over with? So those are some of the discussions that we've had in the past, and we'll probably jump into that a little bit again today. Today, Mr. Howell had a point that he wanted to bring up, and I think it's a good point, and he wanted to bring up the point of readjusting back into civilian life, the combat veteran, the military veteran, who's been out there in combat, in service for many years. It doesn't necessarily have to be many years, it could be several years, but also many years too. And the point with that is, how difficult is it for the veteran to get back into society? He came out of this nice society, mom, dad, boyfriend, girlfriend, the teenage years, all sorts of happy fun. And now, then they went to the military, they went to combat, all the boot camp training and such, all the AIT training, and then actual combat missions. They many times got PTSD, traumatized from that engagement, and now they're back out of the military, they're back at home trying to adapt to civilian life and finding this is not at all easy. So that's where we want to continue today. So Mr. Howell, you were bringing up that point a little bit earlier about the veteran, exactly as I said, coming back into civilian life and not getting along very well at all, not adjusting well at all.
Yeah, I don't think it has to do, PTSD is hard enough if you have PTSD. But I think just the adjustment from the regimented life of the military to come back to civilian life is hard. I brought up some examples before we started about, meetings at work. The boss says be there at 8, so you're there by 8 o'clock, and then you have people still strolling in at 5 after, 10 after. They have to start over again, go over everything they've already talked about. And it's frustrating. That's just a small example, but it's frustrating as hell as a veteran when you've come from this society, this structure, especially as a non-commissioned officer, as a commissioned officer, where you were expected to act in a certain way. I know when we had a battalion staff meeting, if the major, the XO said, Sergeant Howell, we're gonna have a meeting at 8 o'clock, my ass better be there at 8, 7:45, 7:50, ready to go, notes out, all of my anything I was gonna brief at the meeting better be prepared and ready to
When
go.
the meeting starts.
When the meeting starts. If I walk in
Not-
5 minutes late, he's gonna talk to me afterwards, it's not gonna be a pleasant conversation.
Not too much gaggle going on.
Yeah, nothing. So that was expected all the way down. As a platoon sergeant, I have a meeting with my squad leaders or my platoon, and I say be there at 8. It better, everybody, when I walk in the room at 8, they all better be sitting there waiting for me to start.
And you're not seeing that too much.
And you don't see that, not a lot in civilian life. People come strolling in with their donut and their coffee, and you're just kind of like
talking all sorts
talking
of
crap, and the meeting doesn't get started, and then that I'm giving an example, a small example, but that's the kind of frustrations that veterans run into
in
all
many
the time.
different places. Many different places.
Well, I think also from a perspective of a commander or high staff, those kinds of folks that are at the meeting, they show up, there is an agenda, okay? And like you said, Charles, they don't expect people to be coming in 2 seconds after the meeting is assigned, okay? If it's assigned at 8 o'clock, they're not looking for anybody to come walking in the door after 8 o'clock. And, it's just a different world, I think, for some of these people. Because as you said, they were military at one point in time. Maybe now they've gotten out of the military, they're a civilian, they're a contractor or whatever, and they come in with an entirely different attitude about things.
And so you've seen this a good amount.
Many times. Yes.
Because you still work on base, well, you were working on
Yeah.
base anyway, Scott Air Force Base. And of course, there's plenty of military there, but there's some civilians too.
Sure.
And
Oh, they've got all the services, Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard. They've got civilian contractors, and they've got government civilians that are there.
Many of the government contractors or civilian contractors, whichever way you wanna go with that, are former military anyway. And
Most
so,
of them,
and so they're pretty much continuing on that military structure and standard and such.
Correct, and you've also, for all the military services, you've got National Guard personnel, okay, who are really owned and operated by their states. You've got reservists who, they put in their 1 weekend a month kind of a thing. And then you've got the active duty folks that are in uniform every day. And it's a different culture for every single one of these. And the various services also, they use them in different ways. So the Army may be totally different from what the Air Force is doing, the Marine Corps is doing, those kinds of things. And it's,
But nonetheless, there is the military, the former military, current military active duty personnel show much more structure, much more discipline.
for the most part.
For the most part.
Yes.
I know there are always exceptions. There were when I
Always.
was in, and there still is today nonetheless. But
Sure.
nonetheless, compared to the civilians, though, they still typically show more structure and discipline than the civilians who've never been in the military.
Well, and I think from their, just their day-to-day perspective, they've got someone that is always looking over their
But
shoulder.
see, but you work on base, but
Right.
versus working in a civilian, of course, you don't really I don't know, do you work in the civilians?
Yeah, it's all civilians, I mean, very little, they
I
get
know
military honor
I know
guards,
it's the
but-
Jefferson Barracks Military Veterans Administration Medical Center and all that, but nonetheless, there still is a lot of,
Yeah.
I know even inside the VA, there are a lot of civilians in there.
Oh,
that-
yeah,
that were
sure.
not- There's a good number that are former military, but there's a good number, probably even a bigger number that are not.
Yeah. Oh, no, there's a lot of non-military in the VA
Yeah.
that work in the VA. But the thing he was talking about reservists and National Guard, I did some reserve time, along with all the active duty time I did. I had about 4 years of actual straight reserve time. And I felt it hard as a reservist because you were working a civilian job to adapt even. After a weekend, you come in and have this structure for 3 days, 2 or 3 days.
Right.
And then you had to go back to work and you're like, have to kind of readjust. And it's a mental
And
struggle.
you have to readjust down.
Down because, in the reserves on the weekend, you're getting, when you say something, it's getting done, there's structure, there's discipline. And then when you go back to work in the civilian side, oh man, don't talk to, you can't really tell them to do that. But if you want to ask them to do that, you're thinking,
You
Well,
just can't bolt out.
yeah, well, I'm the manager, I'm telling them they need to do this, but.
You're supposed to be more softer,
Yeah.
more politically correct.
Correct,
that sort of
thing.
thing
So-
like that.
And so that, I mean, as far as like we talk about PTSD, that affects PTSD a lot. For a guy with PTSD or some type of traumatic disorder, anybody really, that affects it too from the military because you're in this
Irritation, frustration.
frustration. It makes it even worse. Some of the PTSD, I can tell you, it makes it even
Because,
worse.
especially when you get some bite back from the underlings like that, you're trying to get things done,
Done.
ship shape, on the dime, everything's fine and stuff like that, and you got all this backfighting coming back at
Yeah.
you, resistance coming back at
Yeah,
you, which therefore obviously pumps up the frustration, irritation quite quickly then.
Uh,
Not making it a very good working environment. Many of the military people would prefer to continue working in the military environment. They liked the structure and discipline that came out of it. They had that burned into them, I suppose. That was long-term hard therapy in the military, and they accepted it, and they liked it. I think a lot of people in the civilians would like, many civilians, I say, even when we were teenagers, decided to go into the military, kind of liked it. That structure and discipline that went on there really taught us a bunch of things. It gave us the structure and discipline that we like, that we want to see. We seem to be better workers, want to work, want to be on time, want to do a good job, want to get it done, move on, move on, move on. I really do wish that same discipline was throughout society. I think it would help society a great big bunch.
Uh-huh.
You know.
Well, I've got, my wife works at a local college. and it's kind of a junior college, but it's, she comes home and tells me some of the challenges that they have working within their, just throughout the
School
groups.
environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The administrative personnel who, you know, have their idea about everything is supposed to work, the teachers, professors, et cetera. And she just tells me about some of the things that go on day in and day out. And I'm like, you know, if this was a military organization,
That wouldn't be going on.
absolutely no way. And they don't put up with that. If they tell you that this is what we're gonna do, that is what we're going to do, okay?
Yeah.
Now, if we
So the
don't
best you
want to
can do
do
is
it,
don't resist that, don't fight against it,
Yes.
just go along with it.
yes,
If the old man is wrong, then fine, he'll find that out, but we're gonna do whatever it was that he said.
exactly. And, you know, also in the military, your soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, they know that, when the boss says we're going to do this, that's what we're going to do. But what she tells me all the time is, well, we get the classes in there, you know, and then we have to kind of try to figure out the, you know, the personalities and, you know, some of them are talking back in the back and all these kinds of things, or they didn't bring books or all this kind of stuff. And I go, sorry, that ain't a military world.
I know.
And, you
Quite
know,
a-
they come
quite
in
a
and they
contrast, quite a
are, you
difference.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think the military is a very good experience for everyone.
A good example, I had another example years ago. I was still on active duty. I was still serving full-time. And I started moonlighting before I got out. I was moonlighting as a meat cutter in the local meat cutter. I think it was a meat cutter 20, local 20, but it was a local grocery store chain here that I was working at in the meat department. And I was doing the nighttime stuff. I was cleaning, but I was also making the burgers and chopsticks, cutting ham, stuff like that. But I had to go up front for a price check. And I get up front and I do my job. I'm coming back to the meat department and there's a broken jar of jelly in this aisle. So, and it was on the floor, and there were some kids in the aisle, and there were some empty boxes in the corner there. So I just grabbed a box and I pushed that glass and jelly off to the side to get it off the floor. And I called it in the meat department. I got back and called in, I'm in there working, and then the manager from the store and the grocers union rep there came in to see me, and they wanted to talk to me. They said, hey, you know, why'd you do that? And I said, what, why'd you clean that up? Why'd you move it out of the way? And I go, well, it was a safety issue. There was kids and all. They go, don't ever do that again. I'm like, what? And they go, that's not your union, so don't touch. And I was dumbfounded. Because I was taught, you know, if you're walking along, you see a cigarette butt, you picked it up.
Sure.
You see a cup on the ground next to the garbage can, in the Marine Corps or the Army, I bent down, picked it up, and I threw it in the garbage.
Sure, sure.
You know, and I remember as a troop, if I walked by that, a sergeant from across the way would be like, hey, what, you're not gonna pick that up. I didn't pick it up. You pick it up and throw it away, and you're like, what's the big deal? They're like, don't walk by anything, you know, pick it up and throw it in the garbage, you know. You help out, you know, you were done and someone's struggling, you helped them out, you know.
What are you doing on the grass? You're supposed to be on the sidewalk.
Yeah, get off the grass.
Yeah, so that's what I'm getting at, but I was dumbfounded by this, and
Yeah.
that was a hard time for me. I was struggling with PTSD then and didn't know it. I was diagnosed soon after that because I was having issues. And that's probably one of the reasons why I was working over at night too, double, you know,
Sure,
moonlights
sure.
to keep my mind occupied.
Typically PTSD
Yeah.
guys want to work at
I
night.
want to
where
work
there's
at
less
night,
people,
there was less
chaos.
people, and there was no
And you-
chaos, that was it.
And you don't feel that safe sleeping at night, but you do during the day.
Yeah.
At night, every noise is unfamiliar. What's that? What's that? What's that? During the
So-
daytime, you just blow it off. Well, that's a car, that's a dog, that's a kid, something like that, you know?
That type of adjustment for a military guy, you tell a military man that story, if they're still in there, like, what? You know, they get really, you know, they have, and that's a struggle, man. You have to adjust to that stuff when you get out. And if you're struggling with like that PTSD or any other mental illness from the military, I call it attributed to service
Sure.
or anything else, you know, I mean, that's a struggle, man.
Yeah, I believe that most of the most of the guys coming back from the military have a difficult time adjusting to civilian life. And that seems to be the biggest reason why right there is a great big difference between how the military runs things and how that is soaked into us over the years versus how the civilians are. They just never really had that structure, that discipline that the military does. They may have had their football coach, they may have had their basketball coach, mom and dad or something like that. And so those folks have a little bit of structure, I suppose, but the military is still so much more, and it gets the job done, it does a great job. A lot of people who went into, a lot of the men, a lot of the women that went into the military, like the military for that structure. Typically, when they come back here to the States, back hometown, again, they do not revert back to previous behavior. They keep the military structure and discipline still going for them. And so therefore, they're constantly having trouble with society because society does not have that, so there is quite a contrast. And as you said too, Charles, that many of them like to work at nights away from all the mainstream of people where there's so many people flowing around. They like to work at night where they can just get the job done, earn their paycheck, go home, and just come to the conclusion pretty much that they're not going to be able to associate that well in society.
Do you think that affects the PTSD then? Because that's my thing, is someone with PTSD going to be more affected by what we've been talking about?
I think so, yeah, because, one feeds one feeds the other, but I think so, yeah, if you certainly have PTSD, I do not see where you're going to want to integrate into society like it used to be back in the day. Possibly you want to do that, possibly, but you find it a very difficult thing, and who's training you to do it? In the military, boot camp, AIT, all the other training, they forced it into you, they shoved it into you. Now you're out of the military, you're back home, who's shoving it into you now? You're being exposed to it, but you're not, you disagree with it, first off. You want to see the structure and the discipline, and you're very upset and perturbed at what you're seeing out there. So that angers you, irritates you more, frustrates you more, so you refrain from joining into society. You don't even really want to go back to that way of living.
Well, I think a lot of military personnel that want to stay in the military, and they have been diagnosed with PTSD, it's a double-edged sword, because they know that they've got this problem. They know it, they feel it, they understand it, but the good news is they can go into work and they are surrounded by other people that also probably have had PTSD. And they can talk, and so from a psychological perspective, hey, they can at least chat about this and kind of help each other a little bit, those kinds of things. But in a civilian world,
Very few people out there.
some soldier, sailor, and a Marine that's got a PTSD problem, and they're sitting there surrounded by a bunch of people that have never been in the military in their life. They may have never even been out of continental United States. They have no clue, and you start talking to them, trying to talk to them about these things because you want to try to get it off your back, One, they don't even want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They don't understand it. They have absolutely no clue where you've been, what you've been through, and how you're trying to deal with this stuff on a day-to-day basis. And, I truly understand where Charles is coming from.
Sure. But I know, typically the PTSD combat veteran, whatever, military veteran anyway, is, the civilians, so much of their conversation is laughing and joking, kidding and teasing. They seem to be in happy mode quite a bit. The military veterans certainly can laugh and chuckle a little bit, but I say that you find that they laugh and chuckle considerably less. That is not their mainstream of conversation, is funny stories, and what we did last night out at a party, what we did last night on an anniversary or at the ball game or something like that. You do not hear that very much from the military veteran. He's got a much more serious tone to him, it seems to me.
The veterans' humor too.
Yeah,
The veterans' sense of humor
is toned down.
Yeah, and it's a little darker.
Yeah.
I think a lot of vets are, we'll laugh at somebody at the pool, the video of the person slipping on the diving board, bam, and then hit the water, you know, we'll be cracking up. Someone's like, oh, that's not so funny, you know, we're like, no, it's hilarious.
Yeah, we don't have quite the sparkling sense of humor.
It's a little darker, it's a little crazier sense of humor, you know?
Yeah, we wouldn't see that as necessarily something funny. We would see that as some sort of a danger thing, or,
Yeah.
you know, not danger to us, but a dangerous thing that happened. And our focus would be more on that than laughing about it, laughing it off or
Sure.
something like that, you know.
And that's not to say that civilians, people that live in the civilian community don't have PTSD kinds of problems. We've got first responders all over the place. You got police, you got firefighters, you got all the medical people that are out.
EMT too.
Oh, my goodness.
Teams and stuff.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, and many of them are former military, because that
Sure.
is the setting, and they found a perfect setting for them to work in. Police department, I get a lot of policemen in here, firemen in here and stuff like EMT
Sure.
guys and stuff like that, yeah. And most of them are from the military. However, even if they weren't, it's like they were now, because they've seen so many horrific things out there fighting fires, you know, going to suicides, going to shootings and stuff like that. So it's just as bad. So yeah, there's a lot of civilians out here in the civilian world that never been in combat in the military and stuff, but they certainly do, yeah, have
Yes.
PTSD. A lot of people can get PTSD, a lot of civilians, and typically those people are pretty well toned down too, just like the military. They're at least toned down. I'll give you that. Now, we were talking about two things here. Toned down because they're so fixated on the horror that they went through. So we have those people too. The military certainly has that sort of thing, plane crashes, combat action, that sort of thing, where they saw many horrific sights, and that's really into their mind. The difference between those two groups of people, though, is that the military guy still has the structure and the discipline, whereas the civilian guy never did.
Right.
So they may be quite toned down because of the horrific event that they went through, and they're all they're fixated on those thoughts and stuff, are nowhere near as fun as they used to be. They don't want to go run with their gang, they don't want to party, they're not going to the theaters, they're not going to the restaurants, they're not going to the ball game, that sort of thing. But they still don't have the structure and the discipline anyway, because they never had that embedded into them from the military boot camp training, AIT and such.
Interesting.
So anyway, so yeah, it's quite a thing there. There's a lot in this sort of thing. What can change our lives? What can change our lives?
God.
God can change our lives. So, okay, bringing that point up, of everything that we talked about here, so we take the combat vet that came out, all the structured discipline, combat action that he saw, death, dying, killing, bombs, bullets, and bodies, as I always like to say. What can God do with that, and where can God take that person?
Well,
Because, you know, he's not being everything he needs to be for the wife, kids, and family. He's not being everything that the boss would want him to be. He wanted him to be more of a good Joe that gets along well with people, yet he's quite reserved and withdrawn from all of that interaction. He's not taking the wife and kids out, that sort of thing. So we know why he's like that. What can God do? What can we expect from God, therefore, for a person like that, so that he can be all sorts of happy, a good dad, a good husband, a good worker that's getting along good with the pals at work?
well, the challenge is, I mean, I would love to say that I was a godly man throughout my entire life. I'm 67 years old, okay? And trust me, I was not always a godly man. And, you know, as I grew up and went through various things in my life, I also met many people that were very strong believers, and they listened to me, they worked with me, and they helped me get through some things that I knew God, but I didn't always reach out to God, and I didn't trust God. But they brought me to a space in my life where I did start reaching out and praying and trusting God and handing things over to God.
In that group.
And guess what? Yes, all of a sudden, my life changed. And I didn't look at things from the negative perspective that I previously had. I was all of a sudden realizing, my gosh, God is doing all this stuff for me if I just reach out to him and try to work with him.
Because he wants you to infiltrate, integrate into society, your family, of course, but others around you in your social circle,
Yes.
wherever you go and stuff like that, so that you can give them a good look.
As you give, so shall you receive.
Faith does that. He said, I wanted to say I was a godly man all my life, was not. Times when I thought
That's a
I
good
was,
thing.
I was not.
That's a good thing.
And I think faith, I finally realized what faith is. When it came into me, when it became real to me, what faith is. Like I said, my life started to change.
Sure.
I started to look at things differently. Tiny, small, maybe a bad example, but you get behind somebody, going real slow on a highway, and you're back around, and you're getting mad, so you get up next to them, you take that look over, and you see the little old lady. Well, before, I'd still be mad. I'd be like, oh, blue hair, get off the damn road, you got no business driving. Now I pull up next to them and I say, oh, God bless her, man, one day I'll be there too,
Oh, yeah.
And that's the difference, I think. That's what faith did for me, that, like you said, things
Gives
just
you
got
a-
better. Gives you a little better outlook.
A new
When-
perspective.
New perspective. When you said that, I thought of that also, is that new perspective. You look at things a
A
little
different way.
differently.
Yeah, yeah.
Like sometimes there used to be that guy just 5, 6 years ago, bump you in the store in line, with their cart, man, you turn around, you're ready for war. Now that bump you, just turn around, you're like, well, I hope you have a great day,
Yeah, yeah.
Or they cut you off, you're like, oh, wonderful.
That's part of the
Have a good
growth.
day, I hope that made you happy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's growing up, but that's also part of faith. It just gives you that demeanor. Because that's when you turn the other cheek. I think when God said turn the other, He teaches us when to turn the other cheek and when not to.
Sure.
Now, when someone's threatening our family, our livelihood,
We're supposed
God
to-
believes,
we're
God
supposed
knows,
to come
God
to the
says we have
rescue.
every right to come to the rescue and fight and get physical if we have to and stop that threat. But when he talks about turn the other cheek, it's that thing in the store, that bump, that shove, into you. You're just like,
Don't be so quick to fight back.
don't be so quick to fight back. Just stop and God bless you. Have a good day.
And
And move on.
He says turn the other cheek, but you only got 2 cheeks to
Yeah.
turn here. You got the first one, I'll turn the next one. After that, this is.
After that, it's on. If it keeps happening, that's when you stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
But that's something, that's all along that line. It's a little example, I guess. But
Yeah. But I think, I agree with you too. I think it'd be a far worse sin to not defend self, family, home, and country.
far worse.
So a
And
lot
sharing
of,
your testimony. I mean, my gosh, I've shared my testimony with a lot of people, and I mean, they just sit there and they got their mouth open, their eyes are like, "Are you kidding?"
no, that's
I'm
the
not
real
kidding.
world out there, folks. That's the real world.
Yes.
Not what we
And-
have here in this society, in this country here. This country and society is so much different than the rest of the world.
Yes.
And they don't realize that.
Share these things, and they're like, "Oh my gosh," And I go, "I don't even know why I'm still here. I don't know why God has left me here. There's only one reason. For some reason, He loves me, and He wants to use me, and He wants me to help bring other people to Him, so that, like me, they can be saved. They can be
Yeah.
used to help other people."
Oh, yeah. The testimony means a lot. What can you tell another person, stuff like that? It's a very important thing. We do have to switch missions from the military mission when we were in and all that, for all the years that we were in, to this new civilian mission.
Yeah.
We did that one, we completed it, we did good, we're a war hero, all that sort of stuff. And now it's time to get back into society. We got our wife, our families, our children, the people that we work with and stuff. And we have to pull ourselves out of the PTSD state that combat left us in, and we have to put some effort into becoming this new person back into society, just like you say, so that we can witness to someone else, so that we can tell them our experience and stuff, so that they can learn from them too. Because they need
Yes.
to know too. If they haven't learned yet, they may someday. Typically, everyone goes into some sort of traumatic experience somewhere in their life.
Sure.
And when they do, they're just as much as us, totally unprepared. So-
I've talked to so many people, and Charles, I'm sure you have too. They just feel like they're total losers, I can't do anything. I've tried to do this and tried to do that. I just can't do any of this stuff. And that's when I share some of the things that have occurred in my life, and I go, this, and they're like, well, how did you get through that? How'd you. And
Yeah.
then we get in that talk, and the
Yeah.
next thing you know, they've got a different attitude. Look, you can do it,
Sure.
okay? Reach out to God, He's
Yeah.
right there for you.
You can do it as well as I did it.
Yes.
If I did it, then obviously you can do it too.
Sure.
But that God thing is right there too. We have to depend on that. We finally got to get to that place. Typically, in my estimation, the PTSD traumatic event thing brings us closer to God because it fills our heads with all these questions that they never got asked before. How come and why? How come and why? How come I made it? How come he didn't make it? What are you keeping me around for? We need answers, and the only one that's going to have those answers is God. And when we really pursue asking God for these answers to these questions and stuff, then we start getting those answers, and the pieces start fitting together, and we start understanding what this life is all about,
I agree.
why we're here, what we're here for, what we're supposed to do, what our purpose is.
Yeah.
So, gentlemen, I think that's our time is just about up. Let's call it a wrap for today. Charles, any last words?
No, I thought it was pretty good what we said today, I agree with it.
Mr. Jack, anything?
No, I think hopefully that was very helpful for a lot of people. And, you know,
We'll want to continue on that
we
another
definitely
time.
will.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, folks, that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Drm Open Sessions. I'm psychologist Dr. Paris Monroe. Looking forward to seeing you folks again another time, and we'll see you then. Till then, you guys take care. Thanks so much.